Hey everybody, how's it going? So I am doing part two, actually episode number two of my Rolling Stones London Albums Deep Dive series. And today we're going to be talking about their second US album, 12 by 5. Now, how did they arrive at the name 12 by 5? Well, obviously there's 12 songs on this collection and there are 5 Rolling Stones, but the actual genesis of this title was taken from an EP that the Rolling Stones released, and this was entitled 5 by 5. And so naturally, London Records just adopted this title for the long playing album that and essentially the 5 by 5 EP is the core of this album. Essentially, they took that EP and they expanded it to a full album, kind of like the Beatles did with Magical Mystery Tour, that soundtrack, which was a double EP, and then they tacked on some singles to make it a full-length album, and that's basically what you have here. You've got the 5 songs from the 5 by 5 EP. Now, what was the 5 by 5 EP? The 5 by 5 EP was a session that the Rolling Stones had done at Chess Studios, where all of their blues heroes made their famous recordings. It was in Chicago, and it is located at 2120 South Michigan Avenue, which is also the title of an instrumental on here that they recorded during those sessions. Now, in addition to the tracks that appeared on the 5 by 5 EP, you've also got the single that was recorded during those Chess Studio sessions, It's All Over Now. So you've got the A-side, which is It's All Over Now, and then you've got the B-side, which is Good Times, Bad Times. Side 1 of the album starts off with Around and Around, which was the B-side of Johnny B. Good, released in 1958. The second track is Confessin' the Blues, which was released by Little Walter in March of 1958. The third track, Empty Heart, which was a Anchor Felge, however you want to pronounce it, composition, which again, as we discussed, is a pseudonym. Whenever it was a group composition, they would use that as the credit. Time on My Side is the third track, and that was a song that was written by Norman Mead. It was first recorded by Kai Winding in October of 1963. And Irma Thomas recorded a version in June of 1964. Now, the version that's on this album is the U.S. single version, which contains an opening electric organ. The version that would appear on the next UK Rolling Stones album contained a guitar intro. And then the remaining tracks on side 1 are the It's All Over Now single. It's All Over Now and Good Times, Bad Times. It's All Over Now was a single that Bobby Womack recorded with his group, the Valentinos, in March of 1964. And It's All Over Now did go to number 1 in the UK, so it was a very successful single. On side 2, you've got the 2120 South Michigan Avenue instrumental. You've got Under the Boardwalk, which was recorded by the Drifters in June of 1964. And you've got Congratulations, which was the B-side of Time Is on My Side. You've got Grown Up Wrong, which was another Jagger Richard original composition. If You Need Me, which was a song that Wilson Pickett recorded and released in April of 1964. And you've got Susie Q, which was written by Eleanor Broadwater, Stan Lewis, and Dale Hawkins. It was released by Dale Hawkins in May of 1957. Now, the second UK Rolling Stones album would not be released until January of 1965. So many months after this 12 by 5 release came out. There are 3 songs on this album that did appear or would eventually appear on the Rolling Stones #2 compilation. That is Time Is on My Side, the version with the electric guitar intro, Under the Boardwalk, and Susie Q. So my version of this album, I got 2 versions. This is a version that says electronically reprocessed stereo. And then I've got a version that apparently does not have the electronically reprocessed stereo. And these are both on the London label. I'll show the London label. I really do like the London label. the blue London label, which indicates stereo. If it's more of a maroon color, it is actually a mono version. This is, I find this is pretty easy to come by if you're in your local record store. I see this out in the wild more than any other, for some reason, more than any other early Rolling Stones album. I'm not sure why that is. 1964 was kind of a tumultuous year for the Rolling Stones. They did a U.S. tour in June of 1964, which was, as Bill Wyman said, a complete disaster. They didn't really have a hit single or album out, and they appeared on the Hollywood Palace, which was hosted by Dean Martin, and Dean Martin poked fun at the group and their long hair. You could tell he was kind of contemptuous of rock and roll music in general, and that really comes across in that broadcast.
Rolling Stones, aren't they great? We're going to leave right after the show for London. They're challenging the Beatles to a hair pulling contest. I could swear Jackie Coogan and Skippy were in that group. Well, I'm going to let you in on something. You know, all these singing groups today, you're under the impression they have long hair. Not true at all. It's an optical illusion. They just have low foreheads and high eyebrows.
Now, I do have a version of this on cassette. This was a version that came out to coincide with the CD releases, so it looks a lot like the early CD, just in terms of having that banner there. Sorry about the glare. And then, just like the other early Rolling Stone, or the Rolling Stones London catalog, they did do an SACD remaster of it. If you take the CD out of here, it's got the photograph that appeared on the back cover of that album. So unlike the Beatles, the Rolling Stones only had one UK album at this point to draw music from. They hadn't released two like the Beatles had to this point. And so the next Rolling Stones album, the Rolling Stones Now, would take tracks from the rest of the remaining tracks from the second UK Rolling Stones album, and that is the album that we will deep dive into next. Now, in terms of the quality of this album, I will say I enjoy most of the tracks on this like I do the original Rolling Stones album release. I think the weakest track on here is the cover of Under the Boardwalk, which had just been released a few months before, so it seemed a little too soon to be doing a remake. And Under the Boardwalk is very uncharacteristic of a Rolling Stones style. Rolling Stones were deep into R&B, they were deep into the blues covers. Even their original songs kind of betrayed their interest in R&B and the blues artists that they were fans of. So on the whole, I think especially the Chuck Berry covers that they did were very solid. I think the blues covers, when they get into the R&B material, I'm not as huge a fan of the R&B covers as I am the blues cover versions that they did do. In terms of the original songwriting on here, tends to be pretty weak compared to what we would get later in the 60s from the Rolling Stones. Not terrible, but you can tell Jagger and Richards are still kind of finding their way as songwriters. A lot of this sounds like much of the Beatles' original compositions from Please Please Me, where, yeah, they're decent, but, you know, they're not as great as the songs that we would come to hear from the songwriting partnership, not only of Lennon McCartney, but of Jagger and Richards. So anyway, that is my take on this album. Hope you're enjoying this series. And next album I'll do is Rolling Stones Now. Take care.